The time is precisely 6:15 p.m. This is the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. News edited by Dulmin Samrasinghe and read by Chandima Veerakorn. Headlines. The Ministerial Subcommittee appointed to solve teachers' and principals' salary anomalies will hold discussions with trade unions next week. The Army Commander thanks the President for placing trust in Armed Forces vaccination program. Public requested to follow health advice strictly when travelling in buses. Foreign Minister calls for innovative approaches to reduce pollution and mitigate extreme weather patterns. MP Professor Tissa Vitarana says there is an urgent need to establish a new electoral system to protect rights of all communities. Entry roads to main cities will be developed to reduce traffic congestion. A spice trade mall will be established to provide fair prices for agricultural crops. In news overseas, Australian capital Canberra goes into snap lockdown. In sports, former heavyweight champion David Hay is set to return to the ring. Local stories in detail. The Ministerial Subcommittee appointed by President Gotabaya Rajapaksa to make recommendations to solve salary issues of teachers and principals met for the first time in Colombo this morning. The discussion took place with the intention of making teachers and principals respected professionals in the government service, according to the Vistas of Prosperity Manifesto. The committee, which has taken information from the Ministry of Education, has decided to hold discussions separately with trade unions next week. The subcommittee will take steps to submit recommendations as soon as possible, according to the cabinet decision. Sri Lanka Army has inaugurated the mobilization of its Western Province-based mobile vaccination fleet this morning. The program, prioritizing the COVID-19 vaccination for the elderly, sick, handicapped and feeble sections in the society, commenced at the Army headquarters. The mobile inoculation program is being carried out as per directions given by the head of the National Operations Centre for Prevention of COVID-19 Outbreak, Army Commander General Shavendra Silva. Those who need this mobile service are requested to register themselves with the NOC PCO through the hotline 1906 or telephone number 011 2860 002. Once again, the number is 011 860 002. Army Commander General Shavendra Silva says that 257 persons were vaccinated today under the program. He said another 300 will be given vaccines tomorrow. The Army Commander told SLBC that he thanks the President for the trust placed in the Armed Forces vaccination program. He expressed his gratitude for all war heroes for their commitment. State Minister Dilum Amunugama has requested the public to follow health advice when travelling in buses. He said that about 400 employees of Sri Lanka Transport Board have been infected with the virus. PCR tests have confirmed all 47 employees of Canberra depot have been infected with COVID. Foreign Minister Dinesh Gunawardena says that the adverse effects on the environment, health and well-being of populations demand immediate action and call for innovative approaches to promote access to nature, to reduce pollution and mitigate extreme weather patterns, to promote sustainable lifestyles. The pandemic has increased the gravity of the situation in densely populated urban areas and has driven home the importance of access to nature and open spaces. The minister was delivering the inaugural address at the 47th Consultative Committee meeting of the Colombo Plan. He said while grappling with rapid urbanization is a global requirement, the severity of its effects have been a greater impact on developing countries and poorer nations who are constantly playing technological catch-up. Building sustainable cities calls for investment. Therefore, these countries need support and resources to improve capacity building, to access green technology, energy and infrastructure, to design and develop sustainable and reliable public services such as housing, electricity, water, waste recycling and public transportation, to name a few. Professor Ranil Senanayake, a leading global environmentalist of Sri Lanka, proposes a paradigm shift in the green environment climate discussion. His insights are that urban sector is the real spoiler of the air people breathe. Minister Dinesh Gunawardena said oxygen is burnt every single time an engine ignites in a car, bus, train, plane, factory or generator. The only reintroduction of oxygen is done by our rural green areas. Thus, our focus should also be on oxygen. The SLFP emphasises the need for a mixed electoral system at the Select Committee of Parliament to identify appropriate reforms of the election laws and the electoral system and to recommend necessary amendments. Sri Lanka Freedom Party, United People's Freedom Alliance and People's United Front handed over their proposals in writing yesterday. State Minister Dayasiri Jayasekara emphasised the need of the executive presidency and pointed out that proper procedures should be put in place to prevent the appointment of dual citizens to the presidency. The State Minister said that the possibility of holding the presidential and general elections on the same day and the possibility of holding the provincial council and local government elections on the same day should be specially looked into. The State Minister also emphasised the need to introduce a district council system in the decentralization of provincial council powers. Speaking on behalf of the United People's Freedom Alliance, Minister Mahinda Amravira said that a system should be set up to hand over the relevant memorandums of understanding to the Elections Commission when political parties enter into an alliance. Speaking on behalf of the People's United Front, State Minister Lasantha Alagiyavanna said that special attention should be paid towards bringing in new reforms to reduce election campaign expenses. Speaking on behalf of the Lanka Samasamaja Member of Parliament, Professor Tissa Vitarana said that there is an urgent need to establish a new electoral system in the country to protect the rights of all communities. He also pointed out the importance of preventing the misuse of state property. Representatives of the Ceylon Workers' Congress who addressed the committee pointed out that the electoral system should be in place to protect the rights of minorities. It was also emphasized that the representation of the plantation workers should be ensured. Speaking at the committee meeting, the Democratic Left Front said that it was very important to hold elections on time. They also proposed the complete abolition of the executive presidency and the strengthening of the parliamentary system. The executive director of the Centre for Policy Alternatives, Dr. Pakyathoti Saravanamuttu, also presented his proposals to the committee, saying that new reforms should focus on increasing the representation of women in politics. This news comes to you from the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation.
Get a personal loan for your marriage, education or housing within 24 hours with People's Bank Digital Banking.
Continuing with the local stories, a road development program has been implemented to develop entry roads and alternative routes as a solution to congestion near main cities. Minister Johnston Fernando said the program is implemented in Colombo, Kandy, Galle, Kurunegala and Gampaha. He said the program will be implemented in all districts. Minister Fernando said 9 roads will be developed to ease congestion in Colombo and its suburbs. The procession carrying revered items of Sandahiru Stupa during the past few days in Colombo is scheduled to arrive at today's destination, Samaviharaya in Miriswat Road, Gampaha. Accordingly, the crest gem and the sacred pinnacle will be placed at the Samaviharaya for public veneration. The motorcade carrying 2 revered items will begin religious procession tomorrow morning and pass Yakkala, Vidyavatta, Kalagedihena, Kalalpitiya, Pasyala and Varakapala to reach the day's destination, Tholangamua Raja Mahaviharaya, tomorrow evening. To conclude the local news, the headlines again. The ministerial subcommittee appointed to solve teachers' and principals' salary anomalies will hold discussions with trade unions next week. The Army Commander thanks the President for placing trust in Armed Forces Vaccination Programme. Public requested to follow health advice strictly when travelling in buses. Foreign Minister calls for innovative approaches to reduce pollution and mitigate extreme weather patterns. MP Professor Tissa Vitharana says there is an urgent need to establish a new electoral system to protect rights of all communities. Entry roads to main cities will be developed to reduce traffic congestion. That ends the local news.
Get a personal loan for your marriage, education or housing within 24 hours with People's Bank Digital Banking. People's Bank Digital Banking, your ultimate convenience.
The main news story is brought to you by Siddhalepa Vedamahatmya.
Moving on to the main news story. Minister Janaka Bandara Tennakon says that no fee is charged from the families when bodies of COVID victims are cremated. Steps have been taken to reimburse the expenditure in this regard to local government institutions from the government. He said today that gas needed by all crematoriums is given free of charge. He further said that there are 240 crematoriums which are in working order and local government institutions are capable of cremating the bodies without any problems. That ends the main news story.
The main news story was brought to you by Siddhalepa Vedamahatmya.
Moving on to Watchlight. The offices of the Department of Motor Traffic in Narhenpita and Verahara will be temporarily closed from Monday. State Minister Dilum Amunugama said the decision has been taken as several employees at the offices have tested positive for COVID-19. That ends Watchlight. Moving on to the world news, the headlines. Australian capital Canberra goes into snap lockdown. New Zealand borders remain closed for rest of the year. Taliban takes 10th Afghanistan provincial capital. The Australian capital, Canberra, is going into a snap 1-week lockdown after recording its first case of COVID-19 in more than a year. The lockdown was called for the whole of the Australian Capital Territory, home to around 400,000 people, because authorities do not know how the infected person caught the virus. Residents will only be able to leave home for essential reasons. New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has said that the country's borders will remain closed until at least the end of this year. She said an elimination strategy was the best way to keep COVID-19 out and the economy open. The Prime Minister also said New Zealand would move to a new individual risk-based model for quarantine-free travel from the start of next year. The Taliban have taken the strategically important city of Ghazni, the 10th provincial capital, to fall into the militants in less than a week. Ghazni is on the major Kabul-Kandahar motorway, linking militant strongholds in the south to the capital, Kabul. Taking Ghazni is thought to increase the likelihood that the Taliban could eventually aim to take Kabul itself. The hacker behind one of the largest cryptocurrency heists to date has returned almost half of the $600 million stolen assets. On Tuesday, the firm affected, Poly Network, wrote a letter on Twitter asking the individual to get in touch to work out a solution. The hacker then posted messages pledging to return funds, claiming to be not very interested in money. To end the world news, the headlines again. Australian capital Canberra goes into snap lockdown. New Zealand borders remain closed for rest of the year. Taliban takes 10th Afghanistan provincial capital. That ends the world news.
Development News is brought to you by
Quality matters than price. So as an engineer, I recommend Melba RB500. It's made with virgin billets using the latest technology. Melba RB500, number one in Sri Lanka. Truly Sri Lankan.
Win lakhs and lakhs with CIB Janajaya. 40% discount for your bills till 15th of August. 6 hand tractors at the Grand Row. CIB Janajaya.
Moving on to development news. Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority, with the support from Market Development Facility, Australia's flagship private sector development program, has launched a membership drive to encourage informal sector tourism operators to register with Tourism Development Authority. The membership drive was launched recently with a trilingual video series featuring celebrated cricket legend Kumar Sangakkara. That ends development news.
Development News was brought to you by
Quality matters than price. So as an engineer, I recommend Melba RB500. It's made with virgin billets using the latest technology. Melba RB500, number one in Sri Lanka. Truly Sri Lankan.
Win lakhs and lakhs with CIB Janajaya. 40% discount for your bills till 15th of August. 6 hand tractors at the Grand Row. CIB Janajaya.
Taking a look at sports news, former heavyweight and cruiserweight champion David Haye is set to return to the ring in September to face Joe Fournier at the Staples Center in Los Angeles 3 years after he retired. Haye, aged 40, retired in 2018, having lost his rematch with Tony Bellew in May that year. Fournier, 38, is an entrepreneur who became a professional boxer, making his debut in 2015, aged 32. England batsman Ollie Pope has been released from the squad for the second test against India at Lord's. Pope did not feature in the rain-affected first test at Trowbridge, which ended in a draw. His release means he will now play for Surrey against Derbyshire on Thursday in the Royal London One Day Cup. British number 1 Johanna Konta fought back from a set-down to defeat third seed Elena Svitolina and reached the Canadian Open third round. Svitolina looked in control when she took the first set in just 38 minutes. But Konta showed remarkable resilience, winning 8 out of 9 games to take the second set and go a double breakup in the decider on her way to a 3-6, 6-3, 6-2 win over the Ukrainian. That ends sports news.
Contributory deposit of 1,000 rupees from NSB when your child enters grade 1. Open a Hapan Children's Service account for your kid today. Higher interest. Conditions apply. Business News. Sponsored by National Savings Bank. The safest place for your money.
Mallika Hemachandra Jewellers recently unveiled its brand new bridal jewellery collection and affordable packages to cater to the wedding season. Drawing inspiration from crafting excellence across 5 decades, Mallika Hemachandra Jewellers presents their latest bridal jewellery collection in yellow gold, white gold and rose gold to a discerning clientele looking for elegance and style. That ends Business News.
Business News. Sponsored by National Savings Bank. The safest place for your money. Contributory deposit of 1,000 rupees from NSB when your child enters grade 1. Open a Hapan Children's Service account for your kid today. Higher interest. Conditions apply.
Weather Report was sponsored by
Dialogue, in partnership with the Ministry of Education, introduces Nanasa, a trilingual educational mobile app with video-based lessons for grade 1 to A-levels. Now your child can study with ease on your mobile with no subscription fee.
And on economic news, Sanjay Mohotala, Chairman, Board of Investment, recently called on Woon Ji-jeong, Ambassador of the Republic of Korea, to discuss several initiatives that would potentially increase foreign direct investment from Korea to Sri Lanka. At the meeting, the chairman appreciated the efforts extended by the ambassador in support of the recently concluded Sri Lanka Investment Forum featuring Korean investors. Both chairman of BOI and the ambassador were optimistic of the prospect of premier Korean companies investing in Sri Lanka. That ends economic news. And we take a look at the weather report now. The Met Department says showers or thunder showers will occur at times in western, Sabragamur and central provinces and in Galle and Mathura districts. Fairly heavy showers above 50 millimeters can be expected at some places in those areas. That ends the weather report.
Weather Report was sponsored by
Dialogue, in partnership with the Ministry of Education, introduces Nanasa, a trilingual educational mobile app with video-based lessons for grade 1 to A-levels. Now your child can study with ease on your mobile with no subscription fee.
And to conclude this bulletin of news, the headlines again. The ministerial subcommittee appointed to solve teachers' and principals' salary anomalies will hold discussions with trade unions next week. The Army commander thanks the President for placing trust in Armed Forces vaccination program. Public requested to follow health advice strictly when travelling in buses. Foreign Minister calls for innovative approaches to reduce pollution and mitigate extreme weather patterns. MP Professor Tissa Vitarana says there is an urgent need to establish a new electoral system to protect rights of all communities. Entry roads to main cities will be developed to reduce traffic congestion. A spice trade mall will be established to provide fair prices for agricultural crops. In news overseas, Australian capital Canberra goes into snap lockdown. In sports, former heavyweight champion David Hay is set to return to the ring. With that, we conclude this bulletin of news from the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation.